In the mid-1980s, New York City was a war zone. Crack cocaine was everywhere. Gangs ruled the streets, and police corruption was quietly growing in the shadows. Out of that chaos came one of the wildest criminal stories in American history. A story so unbelievable it sounds like a movie. This is the true story of Larry Davis, the young man who got into a full-blown shootout with the NYPD, wounded 6 cops, escaped into the night, and became America's most wanted fugitive, all before his 21st birthday. Larry Davis was born on May 28, 1966, in the Bronx, New York. He was the youngest of more than a dozen children. His parents had moved north from Georgia, hoping for a better life. At first, things seemed normal. His father worked as a plumber. His mother stayed home to raise the kids. The family wasn't rich, but they survived. That all changed when Larry was 10 years old. One day, his father walked out and never came back. His mother was suddenly left alone to raise over a dozen children by herself. Instead of breaking down, she did the opposite. She opened a small store and worked nonstop to keep her family afloat. People in the neighborhood respected her. If a kid had nowhere to stay, she took them in. She was known as kind, loving, and deeply religious. She took Larry to church often. And in church, Larry found his first passion, music. He learned to play the piano and the organ. As a teenager, he even started his own small recording studio and label. From the outside, Larry looked like a normal kid with talent and potential. But inside, something was changing. After his father left, Larry started acting out. By 5th grade, he was already in trouble. He was kicked out of multiple schools. By age 14, he dropped out completely. The streets became his classroom. From 1980 to 1986, Larry was arrested over and over again for robbery, violent crimes, and drug charges. His reputation grew fast. People said he was fearless, unpredictable, and dangerous. There were even dark rumors. Some people claimed Larry tortured and killed a dog and cooked it. Whether true or not, the story spread. He earned the nickname Crazy Luke, or Luke Hilaria. Police also suspected him of multiple murders. By his late teens, they believed he might have been involved in as many as 7 killings. But something else strange was happening too. Larry kept getting visits from older white men. They would show up unannounced. They demanded to talk to him alone. When they called, Larry told everyone else to leave the room. People didn't know it yet, but these men weren't drug dealers. They were cops. Later, Larry would say something that shocked the entire country. He claimed that corrupt NYPD officers recruited him as a teenager to sell drugs for them. He said they gave him crack to move and used him to rob and even kill rival dealers. Things went on like this for years. But then Larry's girlfriend had a miscarriage. He blamed crack. That moment broke him. He told the cops he wanted out of the drug game. They refused. So Larry made a deadly choice. He ran off with their money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and disappeared. Now the cops weren't just angry. They wanted him dead. On November 19th, 1986, at around 8:30 p.m., 27 NYPD officers surrounded an apartment building in the Bronx at 1231 Fulton Avenue. They were looking for Larry Davis. He had been hiding at his sister Regina's apartment. 3 days earlier, he had shown up crying, bleeding, shaking, and begging for help. He even handed her a gun and asked her to kill him. He knew the police were hunting him. Now they were here. 9 officers approached the apartment door. Instead of kicking it in, they quietly turned the handle. Inside, Regina noticed the door moving. She cracked it open. Her husband realized it was the police. Then one officer shouted, "There he is." Larry was sitting on the couch. He ran. He sprinted down the hallway into a back bedroom. 7 officers chased him. What happened next is still debated to this day. Larry said he pushed his niece and nephews under the bed. Then an officer burst in, demanded money, and tried to shoot him in the face. The bullet grazed his forehead. Larry fired back in self-defense. The police said Larry shot first without warning. Either way, a full-scale gun battle broke out. For over 10 minutes, Larry Davis fought 7 NYPD officers inside a tiny apartment bedroom. He had a shotgun and at least 2 handguns. By the time it was over, 6 officers were shot, most in the face or neck. One nearly lost his eye. Larry, he wasn't seriously injured. The wounded cops retreated into the hallway. Larry walked to the front door, looked out, and realized what he had done. He had just survived a shootout with the police. He escaped through a neighbor's apartment, jumped out a window into a courtyard, hopped a wall, and vanished into the night. At 20 years old, Larry Davis became America's most wanted man. This became the biggest manhunt in New York history. The city went into lockdown. Every cop car had Larry's photo taped to the dashboard. A $25,000 reward was offered. Police raided homes all over New York. Phones rang nonstop with tips. The mayor begged him to turn himself in. But Larry stayed one step ahead. He hid with friends and family. Sometimes he forced people at gunpoint to help him. He even kidnapped a man and made him drive him across the city. 5 days after the shootout, Larry called ABC News. He said, "They're going to kill me. It's going to be dead or alive. I'm unstable. They'll never find me." He was terrified of a cop known as Crazy Joe, who he believed wanted him dead. On day 17 of the manhunt, Larry hid in a woman's apartment at a housing project. Police surrounded the building. Helicopters hovered overhead. Larry held the family hostage and demanded a helicopter to take him to Washington, D.C. After 18 hours, he agreed to surrender if police promised not to kill him. At 7:20 a.m., he stepped outside shirtless with his hands up. The crowd cheered. He shouted, "It's a good thing to sell drugs. The cops gave me the guns." Larry faced dozens of charges, including murder, attempted murder, and weapons possession. First came the quadruple murder trial. After 9 days of jury debate, he was found not guilty. Then came the police shooting trial. His lawyers argued self-defense and said corrupt cops tried to kill him. They presented proof. Police business cards in Larry's pocket. Evidence of NYPD corruption, a complaint Larry's mother filed weeks earlier, saying a cop threatened to shoot her son in the forehead. After 38 hours of jury deliberation, Larry was acquitted again. New York exploded in anger and celebration, but he was still convicted on weapons charges and sentenced to 5 to 15 years. In 1991, Larry finally lost a murder case. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. In prison, he was stabbed to death by another inmate named Luis Blue Boy Rosado. Larry Davis died on February 20th, 2008, behind bars. To some, Larry Davis was a monster. To others, he was a symbol of resistance against police corruption. But one thing is undeniable. He went to war with the NYPD and lived to tell the tale. That's why his name still rings bells in New York to this day. Even after his death, the story of Larry Davis never really ended. In many ways, it only grew bigger. His name became a symbol. To some people, he represented pure chaos and violence. To others, especially in Black and low-income communities, he became something else, entirely a symbol of what happens when the system creates monsters and then acts shocked when they fight back. Larry didn't come from a rich family. He didn't grow up with protection, lawyers on standby, or second chances. He came from a broken home, raised by a single mother who tried her best to hold everything together. He showed talent in music. He had real potential. But once he fell into the streets, the system didn't try to save him. It used him. If Larry's claims were even halfway true, then his story becomes darker than just another gangster tale. It becomes a story about corruption, manipulation, and betrayal. A story about how young kids in desperate neighborhoods can be turned into tools by people who are supposed to protect them. And here's the real uncomfortable truth. Larry wasn't the only one. During that same time period, dozens of NYPD officers were exposed for dealing drugs, robbing dealers, planting evidence, and running entire criminal operations while wearing a badge. Some of them went to prison. Some took their own lives. Some quietly disappeared from public records. So when Larry stood in that courtroom and said, "The cops gave me the guns," it didn't sound as crazy as it would have in any other era. It sounded possible. Was Larry Davis a villain or a victim? That's the question people still argue about today. Was he just a violent criminal who got lucky and played the race card to beat the system? Or was he a damaged kid who got pulled into a dirty game way too young, then tried to leave and paid the ultimate price for it. The truth is probably both. Larry absolutely did terrible things. Innocent people died. Police officers almost lost their lives. Families were destroyed. You can't ignore that. But you also can't ignore the environment he came from. You can't ignore the timing, and you definitely can't ignore the corruption that surrounded his entire story. Larry didn't wake up one day and decide to become America's most wanted man. He was built into one. The irony of his ending. There's something deeply ironic about how Larry Davis's life ended. He survived the NYPD. He survived a citywide manhunt. He survived 2 massive trials. He survived crooked cops and dirty deals, but he didn't survive prison. In the end, it wasn't the police who killed him. It was another inmate. Another man trapped in the same broken system. That's how these stories usually end. Not with justice, not with closure, just more violence layered on top of old violence. The story of Larry Davis isn't just about the past, it's about right now. We still see cases where police corruption comes out years later. We still see young men pulled into street life with no real exit. We still see communities stuck in cycles of violence and poverty. And we still see the system react instead of preventing. Larry's life is a warning. It shows what happens when the streets raise kids instead of families. It shows what happens when corruption goes unchecked. It shows what happens when nobody steps in early enough to change the outcome. Because by the time Larry was 20 years old, it was already too late. Larry Davis wasn't a hero, but he also wasn't just a cartoon villain. He was a real person with a real mother, a real childhood, real trauma, and real consequences. His story is messy, complicated, uncomfortable, and that's exactly why it needs to be told. If you made it this far, you already know this story is deeper than just another true crime headline. So here's what I want you to do. Like this video if you enjoy real, unfiltered true crime stories. Comment below and tell me, was Larry Davis a victim of corruption or just a violent criminal who got lucky? Subscribe for more legendary street stories, unsolved mysteries, and real-life crime sagas. And watch the video below for another insane true crime story that proves real life is crazier than movies. You don't want to miss it.